18 days until we have actual football in the NFL, and it's exciting. For Bengals fans, it's a little bit of a tenuous time right now based on what's happened over the past couple of weeks with the team. But nevertheless, the Bengals are going to look to avenge themselves from a poor 6-win season of 2016, and the potential is high. Hi, everybody. I am Anthony Cosenza, and this is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. We are with you once again. We are so glad that you have been able to join us. We've got a lot of feedback already before the show even kicked off this week, and we are very excited. And I am joined by my co-host, Scott Schulte, who took a little time off last week, did some family time, and we had Joe Goodberry fill in for you last week, who was awesome. But it's always great to talk to you again, Scott. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing very good. I just need to figure out why my cucumbers are turning orange in our garden and not staying green.
Well, if there's anybody out there that's got a green thumb, whether you're in the YouTube chat or on cincyjungle.com or however you're joining us, maybe you can help Scott out, give him some tips, so he could help out with the gardening situation. That sounds kind of weird, my friend.
Yeah, I'm not used to orange cucumbers, and we have a caterpillar eating all the leaves on my green pepper plant. So,
oh boy.
If anyone knows, he hasn't touched the banana pepper, so I'm cool with that. But okay, so outside the gardening stuff, things are going pretty well.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. You caught me off guard, my friend. That was funny. That was funny. I like it. But what's great is if someone is tuning in live and they actually catch it and they're taking you pretty serious and they're giving you some gardening tips there. That'd be pretty funny. Anyways, again, Anthony Cosenza, Scott Schulte here. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. We're going to be talking about a number of topics tonight on the table for discussion. We're going to talk about what we saw last week with the Bengals in their loss to the Chiefs. It was pretty ugly. We're going to talk about a number of different aspects with that. We're going to talk about the upcoming quote-unquote dress rehearsal against the Washington Redskins, where the starters usually play at least a quarter and a half, maybe an entire half of football, maybe even more for some of those guys, and see what we're looking for, what the team should be looking for in that game. We're also going to be getting back to some fantasy football advice. Scott Schulte is our resident fantasy expert. He wins his leagues all the time. This guy, he's just knows what he's doing with the fantasy world, and a lot of good questions that need to be answered for a lot of people that have upcoming fantasy drafts. And if you have one and you would like Scott to answer it, leave it in the YouTube chat, leave it in the Cincy Jungle chat. We'll try and get to those and see if he can answer some of those questions for you. We'll also be taking some listener questions, which we've already received a bunch this week, and we're very excited to get to that. Please leave us yours. We're going to try and get to as many as we can, time permitting. Scott, you had a little bit of some limited viewership of this last week's game, but I'm sure you know what transpired. The Bengals lost 30-12. They failed to get into the end zone. And it all in all, it just was not a good performance. There were some nice takeaways, some nice individual performances. I think, unfortunately, the biggest takeaway from the Bengals loss, aside from, just not kind of playing well and taking the loss, was the injury to Shaun Williams. Now, This injury kind of is a highlight as to why preseason games are annoying, why people get frustrated with why so many games. You lose a starter, right? And he's best case scenario seems to be 4 to 6 weeks that he'll be out with a dislocated elbow. And for those of you who have not seen it, seen the clip or the footage of it, it's out there. I probably wouldn't recommend it if you're a little squeamish. It's kind of ugly looking, and it's very reminiscent of Tyler Eifert's injury a couple of years ago in the Week 1 opener against the Ravens, if you remember that injury. Similar dislocation of the elbow. It sounds like there's not the ligament damage maybe that Eifert had. Scott, your thoughts of Williams' injury, the impact on the defense. I saw, after he left, Josh Shaw and Darren Smith both filled in for Williams at the safety spot, and both led up a touchdown to the same tight end in the game. So should we be worried in the early part of this season, or is this again just kind of a, hey, it's preseason, guys are getting the rust out, and that's kind of what it is at this point?
Well, and I just want to start. You mentioned a really good point about, at the beginning, when everyone's hurt, the complaint is, oh, why do we play these preseason games? Why are we, subjecting the guys to the injury potential and everything? And ultimately, it's up to the coach. If the coach feels that, these people don't need to play the playoff, the preseason games. If, you guys like Dunlap, Atkins, Dalton, Green, obviously they don't need to be playing out there. If you feel this guy knows what he's doing, he's been doing it enough years, you don't have to play them. You're really just trying to find, just to make sure the guys are kind of on the same page. Anything new to the offense or defense is kind of ironed out before you get in a live game. And you're determining, the roster spots for the remaining guys, trying to figure out who's your second stringer, who's your third stringer, who's going to be cut. So if you don't need to put the guys out there, you don't have to. And I'm a big believer that you really don't have to have someone like Shaun Williams or, any of those people out there. You could sit your starting 53 if you wanted to and just put all the backups out there depending on what you're trying to find. So the fact that you have a guy out there and he gets hurt, I think that's somewhat up on the coach, because it's his decision to have that guy. And they're probably going to have all the starters out there for the first half this week. And I'd argue you probably don't need him out there for the whole first half. You could probably put him out there for 2-3 series. Okay, they've done enough. We're good. But that being said, getting off my high horse as someone who doesn't coach and is pretending like I know as much as the coach does, I'll get back to your question, which is Shaun Williams. Interestingly, last year in the first month, he really struggled, especially on pass coverage, just seemed to be lost out there at times. And it's now he's out for the first month or so. And I guess we don't know exactly how long, maybe 4 to 6 weeks. So that probably puts him 2-3 weeks. He's probably going to be out, maybe a little more, depending on how serious, what they end up finding. I think it's a great opportunity for guys like Josh Shaw and Duron Smith to get playing time. And I don't know if they would ever, historically, they have not been too fond of moving cornerbacks over there. So I don't know if someone deeper on the depth chart like Denard or Kivari Russell would end up over there. And I'm guessing probably not. But it's a great opportunity for those guys to get playing time, Smith and Shaw. And, honestly, if Williams had to get hurt, I'd rather have him get hurt in week 1 or 2, like when he did, so those guys can get that preseason time in, get some of figure out what they're doing before week 1. I'd hate for this injury to happen next week and then have him be out for 4 weeks. If we're going to lose a guy, that's when I'd like to, if we can pick when we're going to lose them earlier in the preseason, the better. So I'm not too concerned. Obviously later in the year, Shaun Williams definitely played a lot better. And if these guys play, and it's hard to say these guys will play as well as he did to end the year. But, we've kind of hit on this before. There's certain people you don't want to see go down. You don't want to see Geno Atkins. You don't want to see AJ Green get hurt. So I think no one's expendable, but if we had to lose someone, I think the guys who are replacing him, like Shaw and Smith, I think are capable enough. And fortunately, they're going to have 3 weeks of preseason to get in that role.
Well, you mentioned that I made a good point, and by the way, that those are the only kind of points that I make are good ones. But no, I agree with you, and I've always been a big Josh Shaw guy. I saw a lot of him out here when he was playing at USC, and I really liked his skill set. Maybe not a top-tier boundary corner in the NFL, but a guy that's got enough speed and athleticism to play out there, especially in a pinch. We've seen him play pretty well. If you remember last year against the Jets, he had a pretty good game, including the game-clinching interception as a corner last year. Did play some safety in college as well. So I like the skill set. Duron Smith has a lot of other athleticism and other tangibles that you like as well. But, Williams did struggle at the beginning of the year last year, but as we've talked about on this show, we saw a lot of improvement from him as the year progressed. Maybe that had something to do with playing some weaker teams at the end of the year. Maybe that had something to do with the the fact that, you know, he's getting his legs under him as a true starter for the first time. Now, unfortunately, it's not really fair to George Iloka or Shaun Williams in terms of production and what we saw last year based on what Reggie Nelson had given the team in years prior. Just so many turnovers forced and just a really good player for the Bengals. And obviously he was at the end of his career, and the Bengals brain trust decided not to extend him. But I do think Shaun Williams will be missed. And like I said, take whatever stock you want in the preseason game, in preseason game 2, whether it's little stock or high stock, whatever your viewpoint of that is. You saw both, as I mentioned, you saw both Shaw and Smith give up a touchdown to a tight end in the red zone. Smith had some good coverage on him, and the tight end it was a great throw, and the tight end just kind of outmuscled him. Some people think that Shaw was kind of coming off of a wide receiver and going towards the tight end. Maybe it wasn't his true assignment. Whatever. Those are the guys that were there when the tight end made the catch on both occasions. So based on what we saw last year with, you know, Rob Gronkowski, Martellus Bennett, other tight ends running over the Bengals and making a lot of big plays, I kind of worry about this now, especially opposing tight ends making plays against the Bengals with Shaun Williams out. Hopefully, Shaun Williams will only be out for the first couple of games of the season. Scott, as you and I know, this medical staff, it's gotten better, but you and I are up there a little bit in the years of Bengals fandom, and we've seen a lot with this medical staff. Are you a little worried about that?
I'm going to say no, only because as soon as you say medical staff, all I can think of is the Browns from about 5 years ago, where every week they seem to have a different player get a staph infection. So compared to that debacle, which I think led to even some of the training staff being let go during the season, I can't say I'm too worried. I mean, like they obviously have good guys and bad guys, and I don't get the impression they're truly incompetent. And the injuries seem to be injuries that are legit. You don't have a lot of these silly injuries anymore, which is kind of nice, where you just kind of wonder how is this guy getting hurt? This just makes no sense. Ed, I mean, kind of looking at the preseason, okay, we've played, I guess, 2 games, and we've had Williams go out. That was a legit injury, and some of the other things we've seen seem like legit injuries. There's nothing, no one serious has gotten hurt, and we had last year where Billings and Jackson got hurt in practice, and all the injuries in practice seem to be, for the most part, pretty minor, which is good. And they're doing a good job. Okay, this guy's hurt. Get him off the field altogether. Don't even put him out there until he's ready. They're professionals. They know what they're doing. There's no reason to be risking anything. So, yeah. All in all, I'd say I'm more happy than not.
Yeah, I mean, the point is you lose a starter in the preseason in a useless preseason game on a run stop that I think it was in the middle of the first quarter, and it stinks. I mean, not to downplay Billings and William Jackson and what they did, what their impact could be this year, but last year they were going to be rotational or backup players, and this is a starting player. But it doesn't sound like all is lost at this point for Shaun Williams. Like I said, it sounds like this is going to be something that might keep him out for the first month of the season, I guess. And what's kind of good also, if you look at the Bengals schedule, they do have kind of that mini bye between week 2 and week 3, because they have that short week where they play the Ravens, and then Thursday night they host the Texans, and then they have that kind of mini bye. So maybe during that extended period, you might get some updates on Shaun Williams, and he might be getting close to back in the lineup at that point. We'll see, and we'll update you on this program and at Cincy Jungle. So keep it to both. Keep your eyes and ears glued to both, if you could. I will say this, Scott. The theme for the Bengals this year is youth and athleticism and speed and all of that. And in the first couple of weeks, we've seen that. We have seen the young guys really play well. I mentioned a concern about covering tight ends potentially the rest of the season. Nick Vigil has stepped into a quote-unquote starting role as a linebacker and has really looked pretty good in the preseason. Almost had a diving interception against on the sideline last week, and just is flying around making some plays. I think a lot of people have high hopes on him. However, you look at what the team did in week 1, and you look at what the team did in week 2. They beat Tampa Bay, I think it was 23-12, and then they lost 30-12 this week. First team offense both weeks couldn't get into the end zone. They had to rely on their kickers making long kicks in both games to get points on the board. This week, the running game wasn't they didn't have as many holes this week opened up for running backs, so that kind of stunk. Again, kind of some pluses and minuses on the offensive line. Overall, I think you would say a pretty big dip in play from preseason week 1 to preseason week 2 from the Bengals. Is this something that worries you, or is this something that you kind of just say, look, they're figuring stuff out, they're getting guys on the field, it's preseason, heck, maybe even in a useless game, a guy like Williams going down with a pretty bad injury, getting carted off the field, maybe that had some kind of mental impact on the team, and they said, look, this is preseason, we're kind of just going to I don't know, your thoughts. Are you worried about the regression, or are you kind of sitting here saying, look, this next week against the Redskins, when starters get some ample time, that's what really matters?
I think, I hate to say this, but I think Allen Iverson said it best.
I know where you're going.
When he said, and I'm going to screw the quote up, practice? We're talking about practice. It's freaking practice. Preseason games basically a practice. Yep. And if we get blown out 30-0 or we win 30-0, that tells us absolutely nothing. And I think we're both old enough that we've seen enough preseasons where a team just looks amazing. You look at this team, oh my gosh, like Dallas or whoever, their defense has given up, 0 points through 4 games. As soon as the regular season starts, they get blown out by 40 points every week. And a lot of it has to do with, what are the teams trying to do? What are they scheming? Are they trying to rotate people in? Are they intentionally putting themselves in bad situations to see how the players react, to see how they do one-on-one? There's so many factors that go into it besides just trying to win a game and our best guys against your best guys. And you don't know what their team's doing. You don't know if they are trying to do that, if they're not trying to do that. So it could have been the first week, we may have been doing things a little different, and the opponent was doing something different and just happened to work out in our favor. The second week, the Chiefs may have been trying to win, or they may have been trying something different that just happened to work against us and repeated it. And it's just so hard to say until we get. So if we go 0-4 and we lose every game, 0-40, until that happens in week 1, I really have no fear, because as the the inestimable Allen Iverson said, it's practice. It's glorified, pay full ticket price for admission, show it on TV in the local audience, but it's practice.
You are right, and you have a fan in the YouTube chat, Mike Donahue, saying practice, touche, Scott, with a thumbs up emoji. We'll try and pull up that clip here. It's a pretty epic one, by the way. If you have not, for some reason, if you've been living under a rock and don't know the Allen Iverson practice bit, you got to listen to it. I'll try and pull it up and see if we can get some audio on the show for it. But you know what's funny to me, Scott? I agree with you. You look at it and you go, what are you? You're supposed to gauge certain players in certain situations in these games, and that's really what it's about. You've got certain competitions. Obviously, kicking is one of them, which has been an amazing competition. Those guys, both Randy Bullock and Jake Elliott, have been playing very well throughout the preseason. Nailed all of their attempts so far. Randy Bullock probably kicking a little bit better from Elliott, just from the standpoint of hitting deeper kicks, longer kicks, but both of them have been playing very well. Obviously, you kind of want to get some extended time for Jake Fisher, Cedric Abwehi, which has happened. You want to get some extended time for Nick Vigil, which has happened. And Kevin Minter's in there, a new starter at linebacker in the middle. You want to kind of make sure he gets acclimated to the defense and what the Bengals are doing. So, you look at certain things, and especially this last week, you look at the score and you go, okay, well, maybe it wasn't as bad as you think. A.J. McCarron threw a bad interception. Jeff Driscoll didn't play as well. I guess what I look at is I say, week one, a lot of people played pretty well. There's a couple people who did not. And then this week, a lot of those players that played well from week one didn't play well. And the entire team didn't really play well in a lot of different aspects. That's what's kind of concerning to me. I will say this. You saw some bright spots from Cedric Ogbuehi. You saw some good things from Jake Fisher on the other side. Trey Hopkins seems to have a lot of people thought Andre Smith was going to be the guy that was going to man the right tackle spot. It seems like Trey Hopkins is going to be that guy. So with a lot of people thinking that the offensive line was going to be the Achilles heel of this team, they have shown some issues. There are some issues that have been put on tape, but I think the sky isn't totally falling there yet. And I think some of those young guys, especially as this completely new group begins to gel with each other, I think there are some things that are promising there. And like I said, Scott, the new guys just keep continuing to wow us. And that's a good segue for the next part of the analysis for the Chiefs. I mean, obviously Joe Mixon is still doing his thing. John Ross hasn't played yet. It's expected that he might be playing in this dress rehearsal against the Redskins. But Carl Lawson didn't play last week, but did some nice things in the first week. Jordan Willis has been a maniac. He has played outstanding football in the first two games. You look at those guys, Jake Elliott, I mentioned, there's a lot of good young players on this team that are playing well, and none maybe so much, even though he's a fourth-year guy, than Chris Smith, a defensive end that the Bengals traded a conditional 7th-round pick for to the Jaguars. He has, I believe, 2 sacks on the preseason. There were 4 consecutive. If you get Joe Goodberry, who was helping us out last week, if you check out his Twitter, there were 4 consecutive plays where he had hurries or pressures on the quarterback against Kansas City. He has been a maniac coming off the edge, and was Pro Football Focus's, I believe, their top guy for this week in terms of edge rushers. What do you make of those young guys off the edge, Scott? And obviously, Wallace Gilberry is fighting for a job. There's the Marcus Hardisons, there's Will Clark. Those guys haven't done that much in the preseason, but they're those veteran guys that Marvin Lewis likes. And then there's the starter, Michael Johnson. I've already seen some comments in the YouTube chat about Michael Johnson. Is his job in jeopardy? What do you make of this entire situation? I mean, I would think that Chris Smith is going to make the roster now based on that, but are we looking at potential new starters, or what are we looking at here?
That is a really good question, as far as who the starter would be. But to your point, I totally agree. I think Smith has to have earned a roster spot by now. I think going to camp, the thought would have been Gilberry, Johnson, Dunlap. Willis is probably your 4 defensive ends. Clark possibly outside chance, and then Lawson as a linebacker coming into rush. You look at how they're doing now. After 2 weeks, and granted it is practice, Chris Smith has looked phenomenal. He's definitely doing everything he can to earn that roster spot and doing a very good job at that. And I know a lot of folks, the talk on Cincy Jungle has been, okay, it's time to cut Michael Johnson because he's done absolutely nothing. He looked horrible. I mean, there are some little video clips of him trying to get around Tampa's left tackle where they're embarrassed. Basically getting knocked down. He looked really bad. But I don't think it's necessarily Smith versus Johnson, which a lot of people tend to assume. I think guys like Gilberry and Clark, as you mentioned, should also be worried, and it could be several of them because Willis was brought in. Depending on how many linebackers or linemen they want to have on the roster this year, there's a chance Lawson could take one of the defensive end spots. And someone like Chris Smith's the same size as Gilberry. I think they're both like 6'3", 265 or something. So he could do the same thing Gilberry's done. He's just a younger, more effective version of that. I mean, Gilberry had that great first year when he came to the Bengals from Kansas City, kind of out of nowhere. And since then has kind of, hasn't really been the same wow that he was when he first showed up. And this year it is Chris Smith. He's the guy that's kind of come in and everyone's like, wow, this is pretty cool. Interestingly, there's a site that I go to quite frequently called Roto World that has a lot of depth charts and information for like fantasy and whatever. If you look on their depth chart for the Bengals, they don't even list Chris Smith. That's how far down that he was. He's not even listed today. I just want to check. So I was kind of curious. And they don't even have him listed on their team and they tend to go pretty deep, and he's not even listed there. So that kind of tells you how little he was thought of going into this. I think when the trade was made, thought was, Johnson's not really the same. Maybe this guy could push for a backup role. Well, after 2 weeks and after the draft, I think you probably have to be thinking Willis and Smith are probably your starters. And the fascinating thing is, in the OTAs and the beginning of camp, Carl Lawson was the guy everyone was in love with. Wow, Carl Lawson. Now all of a sudden, it's Smith and Willis. It's not that Carl Lawson suddenly is horrible. It's just that these guys are doing so good that you now potentially have 3 guys, on that right side who, you can be excited about. And how long has it been since the Bengals have been excited about having someone on the right side of the line? I mean, the last time was probably when we brought Johnson back from Tampa, and only because we got him for nothing because Tampa was paying a salary. And before then, you're probably going all the way back to, Antoine Odom when he had 1 good year. And you're like, wow, this guy had a good year. Maybe we'll get 2 or 3 sacks. Before that, you're probably going back to Justin Smith before he left town. And, we really haven't had a lot to be excited about rushing from that side. So it's very exciting to think that, we have 3 guys, right? And granted, not all 3 are going to have great years, but of the 3, probably when it's all said and done, 1, maybe 2 will have a solid year this year. So that's, if nothing else, it's a very exciting situation to have. And you mentioned Trey Hopkins, and I'm very happy to see him get a chance. He was a guy I was very excited about last year when they gave him some looks at left tackle, and he looked very competent at left tackle. He held his own. I know he played different spots when he was down in Texas on the line, had done really well down there. I think he was a Big 12 first team or second team a couple times. And he looked good at left tackle last year when Whitworth was taking a break during the games in preseason, and now they're starting right guard. And the one thing I'd be interested in, I don't know if I've heard no mention of this, so it's probably not going to happen. But if Hopkins replaces Smith, I would not be opposed to seeing Smith get a shot at right tackle, because it's something he's done. And from what we saw from Obuehi and Fisher there last year, I don't want to say that position's locked up. I definitely think that we could, that's a position that we should be looking at all possibilities with that roster.
Yeah, and if they did that, you'd probably look at Fisher maybe kicking over to the left. But where would they need to kind of iron out those kinks, Scott?
Come to practice, it can be 1 practice. Out of all the practices this year, that's enough. If I can't practice, I can't practice, man. I'm hurt.
Practice.
I mean,
so practice. That's where they need to iron out all that stuff. Practice. Yeah, but I mean, I think if you talk about what the best offensive line shuffle could be, a lot of people think it might be Fisher on the left, Bowling left guard, Bodine center. That's questionable for a lot of people. Then you got Hopkins right guard, and then maybe you go Smith at right tackle. Maybe those are your best 5. We'll see. But again, talking about the young guys, talking about defensive line, Chris Smith and Jordan Willis have been incredible. Carl Lawson has still looked pretty well. Unfortunately, like I said, he was not suited up last week. He dinged up his shoulder in the debut, but played well in that first opener. So we'll see as more stuff goes. But at a minimum, I don't think Michael Johnson, to answer some of the questions in the chat room and some of the others that I've been given, I don't think that Michael Johnson's job is in jeopardy. I really don't. I saw someone ask, I believe it was Rel Phoenix in the YouTube chat, asking about the cap hit. Right now, the cap hit for Michael Johnson in 2017 is $5.125 million with a dead cap of $2.25 million. That's courtesy of Spotrac. I think this is the year the Bengals get rid of him. I think it's possibly before next year, which is when they have a potential out of in the last year of a 4-year deal he signed. I think Michael Johnson's safe. The guy I worry about that might not be safe, or the guys that I worry about that might not be safe, Wallace Gilberry, Will Clark, Marcus Hardison, other guys like that, they got to start finding a niche, and they got to get on the field, and they got to start producing. And that's kind of where we're at with that. But those guys, at a minimum, they seem to be, last year there were some struggles with inconsistency getting to the passer by the Bengals, and it looks like guys like Carl Lawson, Jordan Willis, and Chris Smith, should he make the team, will be guys that could help with that. Let's hope it's not just a preseason fluke or anything like that, and let's hope it's not just because of practice. Practice, Scott. Practice. Let's move on. Now that we've beat the Allen Iverson horse to death there, that's just, yeah. Let's move on to the game against the Redskins that is coming up. Now, this preseason is a little different from others because the cut down day is all the way at the end of the preseason, so it kind of allows teams to play to play their backups and other guys longer than they would have been able to do later in the preseason, because they kind of whittle the roster, move on, move on, and now they still keep 90 up until that final cutdown day. So there may be a little bit less of the starters than we've been accustomed to seeing over the past couple of years, but we still think that they're probably going to be out there for a quarter and a half, if not more. The Redskins, if you remember, pretty good team last year, and the Bengals went to London to play them, tied them. A lot of fun things about that game, a lot of just pull your hair out things that came from that game. Not that really matters in the preseason right now, and these teams don't play each other this year, but there's a lot to look at, a lot to watch in this quote-unquote dress rehearsal. Scott, who are some of the players you're going to be watching as the Bengals take the field this Sunday? It's on national TV on Fox, so those of you who do not have NFL Game Pass or anything like that, you should be able to watch this game. Who are some of the guys you're going to be watching, whether they're starters? Maybe it's some of those pass rushers we mentioned, but who are you keeping your eye on this week?
I'll go ahead and throw out, I guess, one position on offense and one on defense that I would be the most interested in. And we've already kind of hit on them a little bit. We kind of started the show with the safeties and our struggles against tight ends, which last year was pretty phenomenal, how we seemed to give up a touchdown to a tight end almost every single week. And now we have Shaun Williams out, and George Iloka got hurt early. So for me, it's our safeties against Jordan Reed. Jordan Reed's back. He's practicing. Assuming he plays, you have this elite tight end, great pass-catching tight end, against a team that you have your starters out, and you really struggle to keep safeties out of the end zone when the starters are in. So I guess that's something on the defensive side I really want to see. What can we do? Because you figure this is the game we're probably going to be most playing like a real game. So we're probably going to see a little bit of defensive scheming where they're actually going to be trying to do some game situational things, where they're going to try to be rolling coverage or, doing whatever they would expect to do during the season to try to cover someone like a Jordan Reed when we play those games. So what do we do in that situation? The other one I want to see on the offensive side is essentially the line. And essentially, more than anything, Ogbuehi, Bodine, and Fisher, if I were to pick one. Name three, because three's bigger than one. So might as well go with the bigger number. The Redskins don't have a great pass rush. I think Kerrigan had a decent year last year, but, it's not a team that you're looking at their lineup saying, wow, they have this guy, wow, they have that. So it's a game that they should, guys like Ogbuehi and that, they should have a decent game keeping a clean pocket for Dalton. And I want to see is can they do it? Because if they struggle against the Redskins, and no disrespect to the Redskins, but what do you do when you play a team that has a great front four? Has great pass rushers. A team is going to be blitzing all the time. If you can't stop a team that you should do a decent job of stopping, if Dalton's constantly under pressure, if they constantly have to use a tight end and running backs to chip to kind of help those tackles, keep the guys, have to constantly double team someone with Bodine because they can't, hold up 101. Are those things they have to do against the Redskins? And if so, that doesn't give you a lot of confidence going forward. What do you do against better pass rushing teams? So those would be the two things that come to mind that I would be the most interested in seeing, because those are probably the most likely to have a direct impact on what we're going to see, I guess, when real football starts.
Okay. There's obviously a bunch of players that I would be keeping an eye on, and people in the YouTube chat, James Napke, Michael Myers, a couple of other people in here kind of having their own conversation, but that's okay. James Napke and a couple of others in there mentioned guys like Billings and Vigil. I saw some folks in the YouTube chat saying that they weren't impressed with Billings. He was getting pushed around. I disagree with that. I've seen him display his strength pretty well. The problem is once he gets moving, and he's kind of at this point, he almost looks like a one move type of guy where he can move offensive linemen at will. But the problem is he puts himself sometimes out of position, and it looks like there's not a maintaining of gaps and certain things like that need to happen. And that's what you saw last week against the Chiefs when some of their guys had some big runs against the Bengals. First week, especially if you remember the Ryan Fitzpatrick scramble for a touchdown, he really moved the offensive lineman out of the way. However, Ryan Fitzpatrick didn't see anybody open, scrambled into the end zone. So I'm going to be watching Andrew Billings, obviously, and I'm really going to be watching Nick Vigil, because those are guys that are young guys, second-year guys that are poised to have big roles with the Bengals this year. And, it's a pretty good offense they're going to be playing against. And you want those guys to do certain things. Now, you may call them a little bit limited. You may say Vigil is more of a, speed coverage kind of linebacker instead of a heavy hitter. And that's okay, because the Bengals already have two heavy hitters and run stopping type of guys in Vontaze Burfict and Kevin Minter. But maybe the run stopping isn't his forte. Maybe it's more of the pass coverage. Andrew Billings may not be the best pass rushing defensive tackle, but maybe he is a great run stopper, which has been his forte since he was at Baylor. And I would like to see, those guys play to their respective strengths as well. And I think Ralph Phoenix in the YouTube chat, I believe it was him or her, I think he had said that he wants to see John Ross. And if John Ross is going to play this week, that's a guy I'm keeping an eye on, just because top 10 pick, the immense speed, ability to, especially with the fact that the Bengals haven't gotten, the first team offense has not gotten in the end zone yet in the preseason. He's a guy that could potentially help them do that. So those are guys I am going to be keeping an eye on this week. If you have guys you're keeping your eye on, let us know. We'd love to hear back from you. We're in the YouTube chat. You can leave it there, or at cincyjungle.com in the comment thread. We're keeping an eye on those. All of our content, in case I didn't mention it before, is on iTunes, on SoundCloud, on YouTube, on cincyjungle.com. You can get in touch with us on Twitter at BengalsOBI and via email, theobinsider@gmail.com. So check us out. Get all of our content. The show is continuing to evolve and improve, hopefully. So we'll keep you abreast of all of the changes that are going on with this show. But we'd love to hear from you. Thank you for all your support so far. Still talking about the Redskins, Scott. We've been talking about this really since the preseason has started. What are some of the goals you think the Bengals should be taking away from this specific game? I mean, yes, a win would be nice, especially when you are looking at the starters getting potentially the most playing time that they've had this preseason. But, you know, there's offensive line play, there's the kicking battle, there's all kinds of what do you hope to see out of and what do you think the team hopes to see out of this game here against the Redskins?
I guess if I were in that position, the thing I would look most to see is pass rush, because that was something that we struggled with last year, is I guess on both sides of the ball, offensive and defensive pass rush. Defense, we really didn't, our sacks were way down last year. And granted, part of that was because we weren't putting team passing situations because our offense couldn't move the ball. We couldn't score points, and Nugent couldn't make kicks when we got stuffed short of the red zone. And so because of that, teams were able to run the ball, and we weren't forcing them in passing situations, and weren't able to just rush the quarterback like crazy. But we still struggled, despite some of the reasons why the numbers were down. Not look like the same team rushing the passer. So everything we've talked about for the last 20 minutes about Willis, about some of the people we have there, Burfict's one else who we haven't mentioned, who does a decent job when they blitz him. He's healthy. Lawson's there. They, we have the pieces. Chris Smith, if he makes the team, he can get in, and hopefully they would rotate guys out like Johnson when we're throwing the ball. So do we have that defensive pass rush? And not that we need to, have 50, 60 sacks, but can we change a play? Can we force pressure? Can we get the quarterback, off rhythm, make him go to second, third reads? Can we make him throw quickly while the coverage is still there in the secondary? Can we do the things that basically change a game by getting good pressure? And then conversely, the other thing I think they'd want to see is, can we protect our quarterback so that doesn't happen to us on a weekly basis? Are we going into week one and not going to give up 7 sacks or whatever, like we did last year against the Jets? So, and that basically comes down to, can Bodine take that step forward and become league average? Can Jake Fisher or whoever it's going to be on the right-hand side, assuming Trey Hopkins replaces Smith and Smith doesn't go to right tackle, can he look halfway decent? And can Cedric Ogbuehi, granted he's not Andrew Whitworth, maybe someday, but he definitely isn't now, but can he look like someone who knows what he's doing on the left-hand side? Can he win the one-on-one battles more often than not? And when he doesn't win them, can he at least do enough to give Dalton a couple seconds to get the ball away? Because Dalton isn't, he's not Aaron Rodgers. He's not a guy who's going to make something out of nothing, who's going to take a crap line and make a play when he's pressured. He's not, he doesn't have quite the innate sense that someone like Peyton Manning or Tom Brady does that makes them great. That, okay, you get to them, but they're going to make that extra little step. They inherently know where the pressure is. They're going to find that open guy and avoid that rush. Just, just by that subtle little shift, where, they're not Mr. Miyagi. They are. Andy Dalton's not yet. I don't know if he ever will be, but can we provide him the protection he needs so he can do that? So I guess for me, that'd be the biggest thing is on both sides of the ball, the pass rush, because you have always great weapons, on offense now. Eifert's healthy, Green's back and healthy. You drafted John Ross, you drafted Tyler Boyd last year, but if you don't make time to get the ball, then yeah, it doesn't matter a whole lot. So if I were, if they were to put me in those cushy seats, with the coaches, sitting in the padded seats with the people catering with nachos and, all that cool stuff. If they're listening and they want to, I'm willing. And even if they're not, but if I were pretending as in that role, I guess those are the things I'd be looking for.
I agree with you. And obviously, the front lines are of paramount importance for any team. And you and I spoke with James Rapine a couple weeks ago, and we mentioned that if this line can play somewhere in between an average to an above average area as a collective unit, I think this team will go very far. I think if you look at the rest of these skill positions, we mentioned Ross, there's AJ Green, there's Tyler Eifert, there's the trio of running backs, there's Brandon LaFell, there's Tyler Boyd. I mean, you look at the skill positions, especially on offense on this team, it's borderline unparalleled. There's a couple of teams that may rival them, and unfortunately one of them is in their own division. But, I mean, they've got all of the firepower needed at the skill positions. It's a matter of protecting the quarterback. I thought you make a really good point, too, about Andy Dalton versus Tom Brady and Peyton Manning in the pocket. And this is something that's a topic for completely, a different time or whatever. But I do agree with you. There's that subtle little step up once there's pressure off the edge, as the step up into the pocket settle and make a throw that Tom Brady and Peyton Manning have made their careers on. Now they're not as mobile as Andy Dalton. Obviously, Andy Dalton has had a lot more rushing touchdowns, a lot more success. You know, they've run a bunch of read option stuff with him, but a lot of times when Andy Dalton senses pressure, it's not step up into the pocket, find a guy and make a throw. It's more roll out, try and get away from the pressure, run around, see what happens. And so that's an interesting take there, Scott. And I think, you know, I'd love to talk about that more down the road. I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on it since you brought it up.
I guess the two comments I'd make real quickly about that. I understand with Dalton, sometimes it's going to be hard because the pressure is right up the gut because he has Bodine in front of him.
So yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
But there are times when he can. And even when the guy's coming up, you know, usually Bodine does, at least unless he's totally blown up, you know, he's kind of pushed one way or the other. You can still make that little subtle shift that those guys like Manning. And it was so frustrating whenever we'd play them. And you'd get to him almost every play and you would never lay a hand on him because he just kind of, you know, he just knew. Those guys have that sense that they can just they know exactly where to go and knowing where it's coming from.
Go
ahead.
And no, and it's just a subtle little shuffle. It's one step to the right, one step to the left, one step up, and it's their poise in the now. Manning had a little bit more of a happy feet than Brady did, but you know, I mean that's just what it is. But that's what they were able to do. They kind of navigated the pocket well as they sensed pressure. But that's, like I said, another topic, another time. What I'm going to be looking for, and I'm agreeing with a lot of people in the YouTube chat, get into the end zone. Score touchdowns, please. I love the kicking battle. I love that we're seeing a lot of good things about Randy Bullock and Jake Elliott. I love that this kicking situation seems to be, as of now, in a better place than it was last year. Get into the end zone. This was an issue from last year, and it is so far it has carried over into 2017. There is no excuse for the skill positions we mentioned. There is no excuse for this team to not be able to get in the end zone, even if it's tossing up a Hail Mary to AJ Green. There is no excuse that you cannot use these weapons and get in the end zone. Again, some others have pointed out in the YouTube chat, rightly so, that the team has, and the first team offense has moved down the field, and they have. And that's great. But you can't just be a great team between the 20s, as they say. You have to be able to get into the end zone. And if the Bengals are not able to do that, they have spent a lot of resources this year to be able to do that. Josh Malone, John Ross, Joe Mixon, late round, J.J. Dielman. I mean, they have spent a lot of resources to be able to get into the end zone. And if they are unable to do it, that's going to spell a mediocre season again. So I would like, even if it means the team, if the Bengals go up 14-3 with their first stringers and then they lose 30-14, I would be fine with that. I think you need to see these guys and this offense start clicking again. Another unit that's got a lot of new faces on it. That you need to see this team get into the end zone, and I think, and hopefully on the national stage we'll be seeing that because we all know the Bengals' woes on the national stage at times. So that's what I'll be looking for. Point blank, get in the end zone. Okay. If you have other aspects you want to see from the Bengals, we'll be kind of scanning through the YouTube chat and other areas. So let us know. Again, if you have not, if you're new to this podcast and have not checked it out before, thank you for joining us live. Thank you for downloading the program. You can find it on iTunes, on YouTube, on SoundCloud, on cincyjungle.com. We are also available and reachable on Twitter at BengalsOBI and via email, theobinsider@gmail.com. We love your comments, feedback, questions. We are going to be taking some questions, not only from listeners about the Bengals at the end of the show. We've already received a few. But for this next segment, where I'm going to give it off to my colleague Scott Schultze here, talking about some fantasy football do's and don'ts. Obviously, a lot of you have some drafts coming up probably in the next couple of weeks. You're wondering what to do. Also, this time of year, there's some weird injury stuff going on. I believe Odell Beckham Jr. had kind of an ankle injury and who might miss the first week of the season, maybe more. We don't know. But we have a resident fantasy expert in Scott Schultz. He is a perennial champion of his leagues. And the guy, gosh, you just know how to win, man. I'm envious. So what are some tips and tricks of the trade that you're looking for in 2017 in regards to folks and their fantasy football teams?
Well, I'll start with a few things Bengal related, and then afterwards, if we get any, I'll mention a few things that might be beneficial. But since we are talking about the Bengals, I'd feel remiss if I did not start with the Bengals. So that being said, there's a couple posts that were articles that will be coming out on Cincy Jungle probably over the next week or so about Bengals being drafted. And essentially, first I want to start with who are 3 Bengals who are going to be drafted too late in your leagues. Even if it's a league full of Bengals fans, there's 3 people who are probably going to get drafted who all of us, if you're Bengals fans, you know who they are, and you should slap yourself on the wrist for letting them go too late and not taking them. Of course, that's all subject with the asterisks of, assuming they do well, and depends on who you draft instead. And so anyway, first one is Andy Dalton, guy we were just talking about a little bit earlier. On most of the statistical projections, he projects to be about the 12th best quarterback this year in fantasy, which is pretty much starter. I mean, granted, the bottom of the starters, serviceable starter. Yeah, he's being drafted around the 17th. Interesting thing is, you look at him, he has a ton of offensive weapons around him. We've kind of talked about that, the addition of Ross, Tyler Boyd, AJ Green, Tyler can catch the ball with Mixon and Giovanni Bernard. Obviously, his offensive line needs to keep him upright long enough, and our offensive coordinator needs to hopefully take that step forward from last year and get everything kind of put together. That being said, another thing people often overlook is Andy Dalton's not exactly a running quarterback. I mean, no one's going to confuse him with Michael Vick, but he scores a lot of running points. He has 17 rushing touchdowns over the last 5 years.
That's a great, not to interrupt you, that's a great point. And granted, they might not be. No, that's a great point for fantasy owners and a lot of people. I just want to say I usually play with a bunch of guys who are, I don't want to say Bengals haters, but they jab me a little bit about being a Bengals fan and what have you. But I tend to take Andy Dalton usually as a late round flyer pick, not only because he at times tends to hover around the 3,800, 4,000 yard passing mark when he's healthy, 25 touchdowns, that sort of thing. Not an insane amount of interceptions, but he also runs the ball into the end zone. That's a great point.
Something that a lot of people, and because people think of running quarterbacks, they think, well, you obviously have Aaron Rodgers, you have Cam Newton, will be probably more prominent in drafts. Tyrod Taylor, obviously the perfect example guy who doesn't throw but runs only. Go way back, you have guys like Michael Vick and, well, I guess even Tim Tebow. But people overlook is that Dalton, for not being a running quarterback, he gets a lot of running yards, especially when you compare him to someone like Eli Manning, Carson Palmer, or Derek Carr is probably going to have more passing stats, probably a few more touchdowns, a few more yards. But projection-wise, Andy Dalton's actually projected to get more total points because he consistently gets in the end zone. He'll get you a couple hundred rushing yards. He gets anywhere from 2 to 4 touchdowns every year. And that's something Derek Carr is not going to get you. And Andy Dalton's currently being drafted as a 17th best quarterback, which means if you really want Dalton, you could probably sit to like near the end of your draft and take him as your starter. If you're willing to roll with him, as you mentioned, he's probably more a flyer. But he's someone who's going way too late. Another one who's going way too late is the Cincinnati Bengals defense. And one thing that a lot of people may or may not notice is that defensive touchdowns basically dominate fantasy scoring for defenses. Those pick sixes, those fumble returns, those horribly fluky touchdowns. And every year, what happens in the draft is guys draft based on how defenses scored last year. So basically, the defenses that are being drafted this year, more often than not, are being drafted based on how many defensive touchdowns they got the year before, which is kind of a fluky stat that is, if you track that trend, which sadly I have in the past, it's not very repeatable. There's a lot of very viability or variability. Yeah, I think that's the one. Where it changes a lot from year to year. Defenses are very unrepeatable from year to year. You sometimes have a team that might be decent for a couple years in a row, but not very frequently because it's mostly defensive touchdowns. So instead of chasing that, which you can't really predict, it's much easier, or it's much better, at least in my opinion, to try to chase the things that are more predictable, more projectable, things like points against, turnovers, to some degree, sacks, which is basically, how much pressure are they going to be getting. And that scenario where the Bengals do really well. They've been one of the better scoring defenses the last few years. I think a couple years ago, they were number 2. Last year, I think they were still in the top 10. Overall, their defense has added a lot better players across the board than last year. We've talked about quite a few of them on the pass rush. Obviously, we're also adding Andrew Billings, Kevin Minter, William Jackson, in addition to Lawson and Willis. And they're going undrafted in many leagues. So if you get someone that's undrafted, obviously it's a good value. So there's someone I'm going to say is not being drafted high enough. I personally would be willing to make them my starter. Granted, I wouldn't take them anywhere. They'd be probably one of the last people taken. But I think there's someone who's being horribly overlooked. And then the third one I'll mention is Brandon LaFell. And the reason he's being overlooked, I think, is pretty obvious because A.J. Green and Eifert, they are the passing game. Guys like Ross, Tyler Boyd, because they're the young guys. But the team's leader in touchdowns last year. He was the number 2. Is going to have value. Now, you would need to be in a deeply draft him. I wouldn't enter small. But if you have a big enough league, he's someone I would consider probably later than he should. So that being said, I'll try to make her because we're probably not sitting with an abundance of time. So I mentioned 3 Bengals who are going too soon. Now we're looking like 3 Bengals who are going too early. Guys that you were drafting solely because of the hype or because they are Bengals and we love them, but definitely don't deserve to be going this way. We've kind of mentioned the Eifert Green. So going to get when he's long past, so most weeks he's going to get you 0, maybe once or twice this year he'll get you double digits. And unless you know what 2 weeks those are that he's going to be relevant, he's not going to give you a whole lot of value. But he's going ahead of guys like, and in some drafts even ahead of Boyd, just because he's top 10 pick, that name. Who drafts him probably will be cutting him after a few weeks. So basically, when he's healthy, he is absolutely phenomenal. His touchdown rate is 1 touchdown every 6.7 catches. That's even better than Gronkowski, which is 1 out of every 6.9. So he deserves to go as high as Gronkowski goes. And if he were a 16, if he was a guy who would play 16 games, he's a guy you'd be looking at end of first round, in the second round. Where it stands now, he averages 46% of the games played. So he plays less than half a year every year, which means if you draft the guy, you have to have a decent backup because you're going to be missing him for half the season. And he's had so many injuries in so many different parts of his body that you just can't trust. It's not like Geno Atkins where, okay, you had one big injury, but it's one thing. It's healed. He's better. With Eifert, it's always something. So you just don't have that confidence that he's going to be out there for more than half a season. And to use a 6th-round pick on a guy who plays a position that isn't really a premium position, that is only going to be out there half the time, just doesn't seem worth it because when it's all said and done, his yearly production is going to have him down somewhere like Kyle Rudolph, Martellus Bennett, Delaney Walker, Zach Ertz, Hunter Henry. He's going to be in that range as far as production for the year because of all the time missed, but you have to draft him 3 or 4 or 5 rounds before those guys.
Yep. And Bennett could be in for a good year with now he's with the Green Bay Packers, I believe, with Aaron Rodgers. So he could be in for a big year there. We did get one question from James Napke again in the YouTube chat. Point blank, this isn't a Bengals one. This is just a point blank question. Who should be the first pick in the fantasy draft? Obviously, some people like wide receivers for some reason. Some people like quarterbacks for some reason. Running backs are always the premium position in fantasy football. There are a few that come up every year. Even Odell Beckham is kind of up there in the conversation with it. Even with that ankle injury, I think a lot of people, if they have that first pick, are probably debating between David Johnson and Le'Veon Bell. Which way would you lean?
When it comes to fantasy, and maybe it's because I've been playing it for so long, I am a big believer of the Usus and Antiquior, which makes me say it's always going to be a running back. Yeah, kind of a smirk. I don't know if it's because it's a running back, but for some reason. So my first pick, now I can't say it's always been, but depending on the situation, especially with the first overall pick, it's got to be a running back, and especially these days because it's not like years ago where you could wait till the end of the second round and get a bell cow. A guy's going to get you 250 rushes, 30, 40 receptions, half a dozen touchdowns. That guy now is like Jay Ajayi. You have to take him in the end of the first round. Years ago, that Jay Ajayi was someone, when I first started playing fantasy, was a guy you could get at the end of the second round. So they just aren't there. And if you skip on him early, if you take someone like Antonio Brown as your first pick, by the time you get the running backs, you don't have a lot of faith that you're getting that production, and the drop off there is so steep. And when you get these committees, you have a guy who, okay, is playing for you, but he's only getting 5, 15 touches a week, depending on the week, and there's a lot of variability. You just don't have that steady, constant production. So that being said, I think it is Johnson or Bell, and between the two, for my money, I currently have Johnson rated higher. If you look at pretty much every major site, CBS Sports, Yahoo, whatever, they all have his numbers, what he's expected to do as higher. And historically, he tends to produce a little more than Bell. For whatever reason, Bell doesn't score a lot of touchdowns, even though he gets a lot of yardage. He does have more injury baggage. And it might be because the Steelers tend to throw when they get close to the goal line. But if I were to pick at number one overall, would be David Johnson, and not because Bell's a Steeler.
Yeah, isn't that funny too? Because you always think of the Steelers as the classic ground and pound team, and it's just funny how that works. But yeah, I mean, especially now, not that the Cardinals don't have a lot of weapons on the outside, but I mean, you look at the Steelers; they have Antonio Brown, they have Martavis Bryant's coming back, they've got Juju Smith-Schuster that they just added, so they've got a lot of weapons in the passing game that they could use in terms of red zone or deep balls. Le'Veon Bell has always been a between the 20s type of productive player, but I agree, not a super touchdown machine, which is funny because a guy like Jeremy Hill, who isn't great between the 20s, at least the last couple of years, has been great on the goal line and has been a touchdown machine. I looked at David Johnson's stats, I believe, between rushing touchdowns and receiving touchdowns. He had 20 total touchdowns last year, 16 rushing, 4 receiving, so a lot to like there. Real funny stuff. I don't know if we've got a comedian in the YouTube chat or what, but somebody named Fat Boy Frosty asked, do you think we could draft Santa Claus? And then Fat Boy Frosty again responds, Santa Claus would be hands down the best guard in the NFL. So I obviously not necessarily a fantasy question, but I'm wondering if Santa Claus is in the chat room in late August with us, because Fat Boy Frosty kind of almost sounds like a Christmas type of moniker. But thank you for the comment there. Thank you for your questions. And speaking of questions, Scott, we've got a couple. We're running a little late, but I want to get to these questions. Every week we take listener questions, and if you have not had your if you had not had your question answered on the air, we would love to have them answered on the air. We would love to hear from you. You can get in touch with us on Twitter at BengalsOBI, via email, theobinsider@gmail.com. We also read and peruse the comment sections on our Cincy Jungle Facebook page, on our YouTube channel, on our iTunes channel, SoundCloud, YouTube, all that stuff. Check us out, download the program, leave us a comment, question. We try and interact with all of you. We appreciate it. We've already got a couple of questions queued up. We'll try and get to a couple others. So if you have some and you are live in our YouTube chat, we're going to try and grab some more. We've already received one just quickly. Obviously, Scott, we talked a little bit about Michael Johnson. I think his position is safe. We've been asked a little bit about that. Do you think Michael Johnson's position is safe in 2017, even with all the guys breathing down his neck, the young guys?
I feel I have to be contrarian and say no, because
really,
yes.
Okay.
But I will give a reason for that. One reason is we did let him go once when we tried to sign him. Was it 4 or 5 years ago? And snap, which turned out to be a good decision. We let him walk and go to Tampa. So we were content to let him go. We brought him back only because Tampa dumped him, and we needed something on that side of the ball. I have to think that what they've shown with guys like Taylor Mays, with Ray Malaluga, with D'Amato Pecco, that they realizing that, yeah, these guys are veterans. These guys are guys who know our defense. They've been here for a while. But if we have better options, we just have to go with better options. And seeing Malaluga and Pecco both go this year makes me think they could justify. It's someone that I could see them saying, yeah, we're turning over a new leaf. We're now going to pick players based on how productive they are, and not necessarily keep the old veteran who doesn't give you very much on the field.
I don't know. It's hard because for me, Michael Johnson gives things that doesn't show up necessarily on a stat sheet, or not in the areas that people, when they see a defensive end, they look at tackles and they look at sacks. They don't look at passes defended. They don't look at, maybe a run stop or I don't know. I see Michael Johnson as still a valuable member on this defensive line. I don't see him as a 3-down guy. Obviously, I don't even know if I see him as a 2-down guy. And maybe for a lot of people, based on what you're paying him, maybe that's not worth it. But that's kind of the guy that he is at this point. The Bengals have made a contingency plan in terms of allowing Lawson, allowing Willis, allowing Chris Smith to be able to be guys that can maybe supplement a pass rush. None of those guys have the size and the wingspan of Michael Johnson in terms of batting a ball down or anything like that. I think Michael Johnson also, again, I hate to use the Robert Gathers type of argument, but I think he is a locker room guy, quote unquote. And I think he's a guy that Marvin Lewis trusts, and a guy that gels well with what the rest of the defensive line does. Does that mean he's an all-pro? Does that mean he's a Pro Bowler? Does that mean I think his snap amount should be in question for sure. I just don't know that he should be shoved out the door, especially for these guys that are playing well. And I love it. I love seeing Smith, Willis, Lawson play well. But again, these are against, for the most part, guys that are second string, third string players, guys that may not make an NFL roster. Whereas Michael Johnson is going up every week against premier left tackles. What do you think, Scott?
I think the biggest part's got to be who they see. I mean, as far as keeping Johnson, I agree with what you're saying. He is the locker room guy. He is the veteran guy. He's not going to put up those stats, but he does have a value. It just depends on, I think, how many people they want to keep at that position. Because I think Dunlap's got to be there. I think Chris Smith has to be there. So it's 3. If you're only keeping 4, you have to look at something. Is Johnson worth it? Is Gilberry, because he does have a little more versatility? Is he the guy you want? Do you want Will Clark there, or do you want someone else? Depends on, or are you going to put Lawson there and count him as a defensive end and, carry someone else as a linebacker? So it kind of depends on what they see at that position. If they think that after those 3, he is the 4th best option, then I'm all for keeping him. If they think it's someone else, the thing I don't want to see them do is keep Johnson and see someone like Chris Smith.
Yeah, totally. And there's also the salary cap debate, Scott. There's also, on one hand, it's kind of like, well, they've got enough room where it's like, it doesn't really matter if they keep Michael Johnson or not because they're not up against the cap. But they've invested money in Michael Johnson, and keeping a guy like Michael Johnson, who has not lit up the stat column in the form of quarterback sacks, has also prevented them from maybe going after a premier pass rusher and spending a good amount of money on a free agent who could be a potential upgrade as a starter. What they've done is they've preferred to rely on the draft. So there's this weird conundrum. It's kind of a chicken or the egg thing where it's like, well, we've got some money invested in this guy, so we don't need to invest more in free agency. And if we cut him, it doesn't really matter because we're not up against the salary cap wall. But if we use that salary elsewhere, we could get another decent player, right?
Well, I think we followed the Bengals long enough. Is Mike Brown going to use a player?
Right. Yeah, he's adding more Gatorade flavors in the Paul Brown Stadium concessions. That's what he's doing. All right, moving on. John Telly, who has emailed us, Scott. Really cool email. I'm going to try and make it quick. John Telly says, hello. It seems to me that the Bengals are focusing a lot of their attention on wide receiver, perhaps at the expense of more pressing needs like the offensive line. I'd love to hear your take on how the Bengals value the different position groups and if they are spending too much of their resources, draft picks, salary, roster spots, etc., on some areas such as gosh, what a great segue. I'm the king of segue. I love this. Such as pass rush at the expense of others, or such as pass protection. By the way, I live in Chicago, and there aren't too many Bengals fans up here. I read Cincy Jungle posts every day to get my Bengal fix, but I don't get to listen to the podcast live, which is why I'm submitting this comment by email. I faithfully watch the video on YouTube every week, and that's from John Telly. So awesome email. Appreciate it, John. Sorry you couldn't join us live. Great question. I guess I'll kind of kick it off, Scott. Then I'll send it over to you. I think we know some of the positions that the Bengals value, and especially we've seen that under Marvin Lewis. We've seen quarterback, we've seen cornerback, offensive tackle, we've seen linebacker to an extent, and wide receiver. We've seen a lot of the skill guys, the big priced positions the Bengals really value when it comes to safety, when it comes to other linebacker positions, when it comes to interior defensive line in some respects, and when it comes to interior offensive line, especially interior offensive line, I don't see that the Bengals value those positions. We have seen probably some of their, if you look at the top 10 Bengals offensive linemen ever, probably towards the back end of that 10 would be guys like Eric Steinbach and guys like Kevin Zeitler. They were two very effective guards. Steinbach was a left guard. Zeitler was a right guard. Two very different skill sets, two very effective players, and two guys that were very integral in the Bengals getting to the postseason. They didn't pay him. When their rookie contracts were up, they didn't pay him. And to me, I don't know. I get that you want the best wide receivers. And I get that you want the best corners because those are, especially in today's NFL, where you got to pass a lot and you have to cover the pass. That's a big deal. I get that, you want the best, there are certain positions I get. To me, it's always about the trenches for me. It's about quarterback and it's about the trenches. And the Bengals and Mike Brown have been a bit more about flash than about a little bit more about substance. Now, that's not to say they haven't drafted good players that have temporarily filled those needs. Like I said, Steinbach and Zeitler, but they left after their rookie contract expired. The Bengals have kind of cycled through different defensive linemen. Now they found a gem in Geno Atkins, who was a fourth-round pick. They found some other guys. I don't know. Obviously, you got to pay your core guys. The Bengals have done that. I just see them, especially in 2017, they kind of went a little bit flashy instead of a little bit more, let's get to the meat of a team. Right, Scott?
Yeah, I think we've hit on this before, and I totally agree. They are the positions they focus on. They build from the outside in, and I think we are both more old school guys that from the inside kind of proven through history at all levels of football that generally is the most effective strategy. You look at the Bengals' best offenses over the last, 20 years, probably that 2005 team and the 2015 team. The thing they both had in common was those offensive lines were phenomenal. They did a great job of opening holes, giving, when Palmer was there, giving him all the time in the world to throw the ball, to get the ball to guys like Chad Johnson and Houshmandzadeh. And then in 2015, Andy Dalton was hardly ever sacked. The years before and the years after, but they weren't as good because the offensive lines weren't doing as well. So yeah, you can have your Chad Johnsons, you can have your AJ Greens, you can have. It's nice to have those players, but if you don't give off, you don't give the running back a room to run, it doesn't matter how good they are. Unless it's Barry Sanders back there, exception, you really aren't going to get too much from them. So I think, on offense, you got to, they put in a rookie quarterback who wasn't really thought, he was like, a 4th or 5th round pick. Got, Romo's hurt. Oh, season's lost. But you have this insane line, runs for like 1,400 yards, and Dak Prescott has all day, so he can just kind of, dump the ball off to, in a very safe, controlled offense because no one's pressuring him. And kind of same thing with defenses. If you can get a pass rush with your front four, you can keep everyone else in coverage, and you can stop some of the really good teams. And you look at, what was the one thing they said before the Falcons decided to give away the Super Bowl? Was if you can get to Brady with your front four, if you can get, they said that over and over, and we've seen
without
that
blitzing, right? Without blitzing, right?
Yeah, because you're not. You can keep those back seven. You're covering Gronkowski, or whoever the team is you're playing. If those first four can get pressure, that does so much for your defense. You have so much more flexibility with what to do with those linebackers, what to do with those safeties. You're not bringing guys up on the line. You're not, making big openings in your defensive secondary. And starts up front. Granted, those aren't glamour positions. Those aren't exciting positions. But it's like the foundation. Anything like your car. And I think I mentioned the show too, and I'll be really brief because I know we're short on time. MTV's Pimp My Ride, show from like 15, 20 years ago.
Yep. It's not that old, buddy.
Like
it's not that old. Come on now.
They'd take like this old 1988 Ford Tempo or something. Barely run. Take in some body shop rims on it. They'd put shining neon lights underneath. They'd put the so it'd be high after a couple miles. But it was, and it looked like a CD changer in the back and had a little pony keg dispenser or something. So I guess that's kind of how I'm seeing inside. It's nice, it's flash, it's cool. But if you don't have the inside, you're not really going to, if you don't have that foundation, you're not really going to get everything you want to get from that, from all those little things you're adding.
Yeah, it's substance versus flash for sure. And when you look at, for those who may remember, in 1988, when Boomer Esiason won the MVP award for the Cincinnati Bengals and the team lost to the San Francisco 49ers in the Super Bowl, name one of these guys that you at least have not heard of that are their offensive line starters. Anthony Munoz, Bruce Reimers, Bruce Kozerski, Max Montoya, Joe Walter. So the Bengals at that point, whether that was Paul Brown's doing, who was still alive at that point, or what, they knew that the key to what they were doing on offense was in a very solid offensive line. You had the best tackle to ever play the game on one side. You had one of the better guards to ever play, and probably one of the most underrated guards ever in Max Montoya to on their line. And then you had three other guys who are just warriors on that line. And, obviously that team had some success, and it was largely in due to what they did on the offensive line. And unfortunately, to the point of the question from John, safety, guard, certain linebacker spots, they just aren't valued by the Cincinnati Bengals. Even center isn't even that valued by the Cincinnati Bengals, and that may be a deterrent. But they also feel that they've got a great coach in Paul Alexander that could develop a lot of offensive line talent. So it is kind of what it is. We're way past time here, Scott, but we've got another question. It's from Keith Evans from the Bahamas, and we've heard from Keith before, and it's great to hear from Keith again. Hello, Mr. Cosenza and my fellow Orange and Black Insiders family. I love that. Houday. Great way to start an email. Just a quick comment and then two terse questions. Firstly, thanks once again for producing my favorite podcast. Well, that is flattering. I love that. Always look forward to hearing from you and your fellow Bengals scholar, Scott Schulte. My comment is regarding Saturday night's debacle at Paul Brown Stadium. I know it's preseason, but that game reminded me of the disappointing 2016 season. I am hoping that the Bengals weren't playing up to their potential in that beatdown by Kansas City. I'm beginning to appreciate your tapered expectations for the Bengals this upcoming season. I had them going 13-3 at best, worst case scenario 11-5. Now I wouldn't be shocked if this team wins just 6 games based on what I saw this past weekend. As a Bengals fan, I was completely embarrassed. His other questions, just so you know, was about Michael Johnson. We've already talked about, and a lot about the offensive line and things we've already talked about in this podcast. So, and I've also seen some comments, Scott, and questions in the YouTube chat asking you if you have kind of tapered your expectations about your season prediction of the team. I think you had them, 12-4, 13-3, 11-5, somewhere in there, based on what you've seen and heard from the team so far in their first 2 preseason games. Again, it's kind of like, is it just, dumb preseason games, or should we, where there's smoke, there's fire? You know what I mean?
I'd say, lower expectations yet until they play meaningful football. Now, if week 1 looks like the Chiefs game, then okay, I'm ready to go back and reevaluate. But until then, until both teams are trying to win, it's very difficult to base too much on that.
So you, regardless of what, we talked about this a little bit. I think I talked about it maybe with Joe Goodberry last week. With your expectations, and again, maybe what we've seen from week 1 to week 2 in the preseason, there might be a little bit of a Jekyll and Hyde type of characteristic with this Bengals team. But just again, to kind of tie a ribbon over the question there, for those who have followed me and what I've said about the statistical projection for the Bengals this year and their win-loss record, I've had them kind of in between that 9-10 win area. What I've seen this year so far in the preseason, it doesn't really deter me from my prediction. I mean, I didn't kind of go big with the 12 or 13 wins type of thing, but I don't know, again, because of the youth, because of what we saw last year, because of so many different pieces that are starting. I don't know if we can tell from week to week what this team will give us. I just don't know if I don't know if the consistency is there. Now, like Scott said before he cut out there, like he said, Marvin Lewis is a guy who is known as a coach that can get a team to win games that they are supposed to win. And there are a number of games on this year's schedule that the Bengals are supposed to win. It's not only is it a matter of them doing that, but it's also a matter of them winning some games that they are not supposed to win. whether it's in the AFC North, whether it's against teams like the Titans, other teams that played well last year. It just depends. I still think this team is too talented to not sniff the playoffs. It's just a matter of consistency for me. I wonder about the offensive line. I wonder about, do they make the right decisions at final cut day? I'm a little worried that, when you look at some of their better teams they've had recently, I don't know. The potential for this team is way high. Unfortunately, the ceiling could be relatively low. Might they fall between those two areas? I don't know. We'll see. But for me personally, a guy that has had them at about 9 or 10 wins, the first 2 weeks didn't temper my expectations. It, if anything, affirmed them in that I don't know what we're going to get from week to week. We could see a team that could go on a romp for 3-4 weeks straight and then all of a sudden go on a losing streak of 2 to 3 games. We don't know. And I think the potential is high for this team. We'll see what they end up actually doing. I don't know. I guess we lost Scott for the rest of the program. I apologize for some of the cutouts there. For those of you who were tuning in live, I apologize for some of the little ticks there, but I appreciate everybody. We appreciate everybody that tuned in live. We appreciate everybody that has submitted questions. It's been a ton of fun talking with all of you. It's been a ton of fun talking Bengals with all of you. Hopefully you received some good fantasy football advice. Hopefully you got some good insight on the Bengals. And as I mentioned earlier in the program, you can catch the show on YouTube, on SoundCloud, on iTunes, at cincyjungle.com, and you can get in touch with the show on Twitter at BengalsOBI and the OBinsider@gmail.com. We appreciate the support. We love talking Bengals with you. Hopefully we see you soon, and let's hope that the Bengals have a good showing as they face the Redskins next week. Appreciate it. Hoo day, guys.